Why are SUVs so popular? Well, it's because they inspire adventure. They give you that king of the road feeling sitting high in the car, and you can take them on incredible adventures. But not everyone can have a weekend dedicated adventure rig. Most of us need a car which can do the school run during the week and then maybe take us on a road trip to Goa during the weekend. And the Creta, it aces that role. They are getting pretty expensive, but you don't need to pay showroom prices to get one. Welcome to Evo India's half price heroes. Cretas, first generation Cretas are available for around 7 lakh rupees, and this is everything you need to know before going out and buying one. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell notification icon to stay notified. The Hyundai Creta was launched in India in 2015 to compete with the Renault Duster, the Ford EcoSport and the Mahindra XUV 500. While all of these SUVs were doing pretty well for themselves, the Creta just took the ball and ran with it. It became so successful that the segment is now casually called the Creta class. While the second and third generations are still relatively new and retaining their value really well, the first generation is now available for the price of an Exter. The first generation Creta came with 3 engine options. There was a 1.6 litre petrol, a 1.4 litre diesel and a 1.6 litre diesel that I am driving today. The 1.6 litre petrol and the 1.4 litre diesel came only with manual transmissions, initially at least. In 2016, the 1.6 litre petrol got an automatic, but the diesel, the 1.6 litre diesel, always had an automatic from launch. The 1.6 litre petrol is perfectly acceptable if you're only going to drive in the city. It only has about 121 bhp, but it's naturally aspirated, so it's easy to maintain, it's light on the pocket in that sense. But if you want a bit more performance, the 1.6 litre diesel is the one to have. It has 126 bhp and 260 Newton meters of torque, and even today it actually feels really quite powerful. The one I'm driving is mated to a 6-speed automatic. You could also get a 6-speed manual. The 1.4 litre diesel is a good compromise between the two. It didn't have the performance of the 1.6, but it had fuel economy. In fact, it was rated for 21 kmpl. But one thing to keep in mind, it only ever came with a manual transmission, so there is no automatic. If you want an automatic, the 1.6 diesel is the one. With the 2018 facelift, Hyundai added a host of new features to the Creta. Crucially, they improved the powertrain by widening the torque band of the 1.6 litre diesel. The maximum torque is now produced at 1500 to 3000 rpm compared to the earlier 1900 to 2750 rpm. This change improved both drivability and fuel economy. So if the driving experience of an early Creta is not to your liking, you may want to try a later version and see if there is a difference. Before you make up your mind on which engine and gearbox combo works best for you, you need to take a look at the variants, because here is where things get a little complicated. So complicated in fact that I've had to make a list which I'm going to refer to. At launch, the Creta was launched in 6 variants. There was the base, there was the S, S Plus, SX, SX Plus and finally the SXO. Here's a breakdown of what the variants offered. The base variant got the basics like power windows, central locking, a basic audio system with 4 speakers and 16-inch steel wheels with plastic hubcaps. This variant was only available with the 1.6 litre petrol and the 1.4 litre diesel. Up next, the Creta S added fog lamps, a touchscreen infotainment system, and this variant was only available with the 1.6 litre petrol and the 1.4 litre diesel. The S Plus added dual airbags, 16-inch alloy wheels, a steel spare wheel, a parking camera with guidelines, and this variant was only available on the 1.4 litre diesel. This was the highest trim level available with that engine option, so this is something to keep in mind. Up next, the SX variant. This added 16-inch alloy wheels, projector headlamps, LED position lamps, rear washer and wiper, and this engine was available with either the 1.6 litre petrol or the 1.6 litre diesel engine. Up next is the SX Plus variant that we have here today. This added a smart key with a push button start. It got split folding rear seats and an ISOFIX mount, which the top variant actually did not get. This was available with the 1.6 litre petrol and the 1.6 litre diesel. Importantly, the automatic transmission was only available on this variant. This was at a time when automatic transmissions were not that popular, so Hyundai didn't choose to give the automatic to the top end variant, instead opting to give it to the one below it. And finally, speaking of the top end variant, there is the SXO. This got 17-inch diamond cut alloys, side and curtain airbags, so the total is 6 airbags, electronic stability control, hill assist, leather upholstery, a 7-inch touchscreen, and this variant was only available with the 1.6 diesel, and in 2018 the 1.6 petrol was also made available. So as you can tell, there is a lot to choose from, so do your research and determine which variant works best for you. If you can live with a manual, then the SXO is the one to have, but if you have to have an automatic, the SX Plus like this one is the only option. Another quick pro tip here, make sure you check the paperwork for the vehicle and the variant that you're looking at. The badge on the boot lid does not specify whether this is an SX or an SX Plus or an SXO. So it's possible that someone will try and pass off an accessorized variant as more than it actually is. So make sure you check the paperwork properly. So you've picked the one you want and now you can start the hunt. Cretas are pretty common, so they should not be too hard to find on online used car websites. Hyundai also has their own certified used car program called Click to Buy. As always, the real bargains are found through word of mouth, so speak to friends, colleagues and relatives to see if they know of one for sale. Now that you've found the car that you're looking for, what do you need to look for when you're inspecting a Creta? Now, as we said in our previous video, all the same checks apply. Check the bodywork, check the glass, check for paint work. If you haven't watched that video, please go and give it a look. But in particular on a Creta, you need to look for modifications. The facelift, which came halfway in the first generation's life cycle, got a new front bumper and a new headlamp. Now these are bolt-on parts, so a lot of people just swap on these parts onto their old Creta. You have to question whether this was done just for aesthetics or was there an accident and that's why these parts were replaced. Apart from that, this particular car is very clean, but a lot of Cretas are heavily accessorized with all sorts of chrome accessories, side steps, stuff like that. If those things are not to your liking, make sure you can remove them without actually damaging the paint, especially stuff like side steps. Have they been installed without actually drilling holes into the body? Another very popular accessory on a Creta is lighting. LED lights, HID lights, flashing lights of all sorts, light bars and all those sorts of things. You typically want to avoid cars like that because that involves cutting into the original wiring loom and you do not want to be chasing someone else's wiring experiments. Now the Creta's interior was generally really well put together, so squeaks and rattles shouldn't really be an issue. You do all the normal checks that you would with any used car, but here are some specific things you need to check with a Creta. First things first, the infotainment system. Now this system was state of the art back in the day, but today it feels a little dated. It's slow to react, it also hangs every once in a while, but unfortunately there's no real fix for this. There's just something which happens with time. If the infotainment system has been replaced with something else, or there are more accessories that have been wired into the car, you really need to check if that was done properly because you don't want to be messing with someone else's wiring problems. With a Creta, it is important to inspect all the original documents before proceeding. First, ensure the vehicle is in the seller's name. Cretas are frequently stolen, so check the VIN on Parivahan to find its history. Also be aware of cloned cars, where thieves use the VIN of a legal vehicle to create counterfeit tags for a stolen one. To verify this, input the VIN into Parivahan or an online VIN decoder and check if the specs match the vehicle you're looking at. Additionally, inspect the physical VINs in the door openings and under the driver's seat for signs of tampering. If all checks out, then it's time for a test drive. Make sure you start the vehicle from cold. Make sure when you start it, it doesn't emit any smoke from the back. Make sure it idles smoothly, and then it's time to head out for the test drive. So, what do you need to look out for when you're on the test drive? Well, Hyundais and Cretas in general are very reliable, so there's not much which goes particularly wrong with them. Clutch wear is a problem on the diesels. Some of them wear as early as 20,000 kilometers. So be aware because changing a clutch on a Creta can cost between 15 to 20,000 rupees depending on where you do it. Another thing to look out for is the steering column. Some of the early Cretas developed an issue with the steering column where you hear a rattle or a noise coming from the steering column. Now this can even be felt in the footwell, so watch out for that. Normally a fix is the replacement of a bush within the steering column, which also requires the removal of the entire column. But in rare cases, the entire steering column needs to be replaced, which can cost upwards of 50,000 rupees. And now it's time to bring the vehicle to a workshop for a full detailed check. If you don't know what exactly to check, then most reputed workshops will do a pre-purchase inspection for a small fee. But here are some of the basics that you need to check. Starting at the front, look for leaks from the engine, from the transmission, from the radiator. On the Creta in particular, check the brakes. The Creta never had great brakes, and with time these brakes tend to fade quite a lot. From here you can check the brakes, you can check the discs and the pads really well. Check if there's a lip on them, if the pads are worn out, or if the disc itself is showing signs of wear. You can get away with skimming it once on a lathe machine, but after that you will need to replace the brakes. From here you can also give the suspension a good check. Give the wheel a good shake, listen for any clunks or any rattles. This could indicate that some joints are loose and might need replacing. And finally, the Creta, being an SUV, owners may have taken it off-road, so check the underside for damage from rocks and other stuff which may eventually lead to rust. Now this is also a great time to check under the bonnet. Do all your usual checks, all the fluids, check for accident damage. But on a Creta automatic in particular, ask the owner when the automatic transmission fluid was last replaced. Now Hyundai says that the automatic transmission does not require a service under normal usage, and in severe conditions it requires a service every 100,000 kilometers. But I would never wait that long. The automatic transmission is a very delicate and complicated piece of machinery. It requires a service at least every 60,000 kilometers, replacing the oil and the filter inside. Because if the transmission fails, replacing it with a new unit can cost upwards of 6.5 lakh rupees. Now Hyundai has a vast service network in India and parts are generally quite cheap. But the Creta being a premium vehicle, the parts are never going to be as cheap as a hatchback. To give you an idea of what commonly replaced parts cost, here's a table for your reference. There have been few isolated incidents of head gasket failure, so always check the oil filler cap for a mayonnaise type sticky substance which indicates that oil and water are mixing inside the engine. Additionally, check if the engine is running smoothly. If it's not, it's probably the fuel injectors, which do tend to go bad because of the bad fuel. Replacing fuel injectors can be quite expensive, so you can find a specialist who rebuilds fuel injectors for a fraction of the price. And now for my favorite bit, mods. First things first, wheels and tires. If you get one of the lower variants, you can source a set of 17-inch wheels from the SXO. They come with 215/60 section tires. If you want to go even bigger, which I would not recommend, you could even fit the wheels from an Alcazar. Those are 215/55 section tires on 18-inch rims. Even the Seltos's rims are a direct fit because they all share the same PCD. OEM wheels brand new are really expensive, but they're not hard to find second-hand wheels. Make sure you check them for cracks and any curb rash. The Creta, particularly in diesel form, is a really great mile muncher, so I would focus my mods in that direction. Now it has really great roof rails, so you could source a roof box to carry extra luggage because the 400-liter boot might not be sufficient if you're traveling with the entire family. Roof boxes can range between 50 to 90,000 rupees, which is a bit steep, but again, you could source them used. The 1.6 diesel can be equipped with a stage 1 tune, which will give it a lot more performance, but also be sure to upgrade your brakes when you do that. And finally, how much to pay for your Creta? At the time of making this video, prices range from anywhere between 7 and 9 lakhs for an early petrol manual. Prices for an automatic diesel post-facelift car can range between 12 and 14 lakhs. Now with so many variants on offer, prices can vary quite a bit. In most of India, diesel cars are sold at a slight premium, but in the Delhi NCR region, they are almost on par with petrols because of the 10-year diesel ban. And there you have it, your in-depth guide on how to buy a Hyundai Creta. Buying used cars can be a gamble, but do your research properly, inspect your vehicle thoroughly, and you can find a real bargain. Join us again next time when we'll take you through another half-price heroes. If you like this video, please share it with your friends, give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment, and stay tuned for more videos just like this.